Hi, I'm Emily Agnew with some thoughts about handling relationship conflict without getting overwhelmed. What has worked for me and my partner? I can tell you first what didn't work. We were subject to the very common belief that communicating better is the key to resolving conflicts. Of course, we need to communicate, but it turns out that actually it's the how, not the what, that really matters. People have wildly different ways of successfully handling conflict. It can look very different from the outside. And it was John Gottman, the psychologist, who first brought married couples into his love lab in Seattle that discovered all this. It was really fascinating. People would come for the weekend and he'd hook them up to, the electrode things, electroencephalograph, and assign them to, at some point, bring up a really tough topic and get into it. And it turned out he could tell with 96% accuracy after the first 3 minutes which couples would reach some kind of satisfying, useful end to their conflict. That is, resolve it. He could also tell, depending on what he saw, so I think it was around 90% accuracy, which couples were likely to still be married a year later. Yikes. That really galvanized me to pay close attention to his book, I'll tell you. So, one of the key things that he talks about that he saw in couples who were struggling was what he called a harsh startup, where the difficult topic comes up on the fly in anger or in an attacking way. So that's the number one thing that my partner and I do is try to have what I call a soft start. So if we've had a harsh exchange and bounced apart, or if there's a topic hanging, that something that happened between us or an issue we haven't resolved, one or the other of us will come to the other and say, hey, I know there's this thing we got to talk about and it's a tough one. Is there some time in the next week, that we could talk? Trying like lots of spaciousness, and we find a time that's good for both of us. It's like a social contract. So this is kind of my bigger point, is it's not so much exactly what you say. It's not I statements. You can say I statements in an incredibly attacking way. It's not what you say. It's the container that you say it in. And this is a container of care, already to consider the other person in terms of when you talk. So that's a kind of soft entry into the conversation. And then we also have an agreement with ourselves and each other that will make as soft as possible an exit if we get triggered. What do I mean by triggered? John Gottman talked about flooding, and the presence of flooding is another characteristic of exchanges that are not likely to turn out well. Flooding is his non-technical word for hypo or hyper arousal. You can read more about those two things elsewhere on my site, but it's where your system goes into overload. And the effect either way is that your prefrontal cortex goes offline along with your better judgment and your self-control. So that's a really good time to exit stage left. So as you see, you got to know yourself and know those signs as you see them coming on. You say something as soft as possible. If you can't manage anything soft, just get out. That's better than doing more damage. But best is to say something like, wow, okay, I'm starting to get really toasted. I'm afraid I'm going to say stuff that I'm going to regret. I'm going to take a time out now. I'll come and talk to you later to find another time to talk. Right? So I didn't attack the other person. I didn't say you're impossible, we'll never resolve this. I'm making it clear to them I'm not walking away from the topic. I'm walking away in the moment because I'm too toasted. We're vulnerable in those moments. So especially for sensitive people, it's so hard for us to get into conflict in the first place. So we really need that reassurance that it's okay. The other person, they love us. They just need a break. So soft in, soft out. And then what about in between? And the cool thing is with the soft in and the soft out, the in between can be much more kind of natural. You don't have to like stilt yourself. You just take turns and keep it short and simple. Say one thing at a time to your partner and have them reflect it back. For our toughest issues, we reflect everything back. You just don't want to assume that what you think you said is what the other person actually heard. So that's the purpose of the reflection, is they say back in their own words the essence of what they heard you say. And you keep it slow because it's a tough topic for both of you. It's hard to remember more than a couple of sentences. You take turns that way. So that's like the basic structure for the middle of the conversation, right? With the understanding that if anyone gets triggered, they'll take their time out. There's another thing too that Gottman talks about that's actually a key element when they've brought successful marriage couples into the lab. They do something that he calls a repair attempt, where one of them will just break the ice a little. They'll say some little funny thing to their partner or refer to some shared experience or make some affectionate gesture. Whatever it is, it's very personal to you and to your partner. Only you know what that would look like. But it's like a way of reaching out in effect and saying, hey, it's me over here. I still love you even though we're having a big fight. It's just reassuring. And I had to do a second take of this video because I started crying the first time I talked about this. But the repair attempts, the heartbreaking thing is, you would think that couples that are really struggling just wouldn't, there'd be an absence of repair attempts. And actually the opposite is true. Couples who are struggling make more repair attempts, but they're not received. It's almost as if the other person is in a place of, hey, too little, too late. Not perceived, not received, or not perceived. But repair attempts are really, really powerful. And then there's one more thing, and that's what I would call the big out, right? We have our soft out from the actual conversation. But the big out would be knowing when you need help. Because if you can't even get yourself to approach your partner to schedule something, that's a sign that that you're so afraid of it going south, or that the two of you just can't hold a container for each other in the way that I've described. Then it's no shame to get help. We get help on stuff all the time. It's just a sign that old stuff is getting kicked up that sends you both into that hypo or hyper aroused state. So we've had really good luck with EFT therapy, not to be confused with EFT tapping. That's something different. This EFT stands for Emotionally Focused Therapy. It's the work of Sue Johnson. It works directly with attachment issues between a couple, and it's super, super powerful, right to the point. And the cool thing is your attachment stuff often dovetails in a couple, so you kind of get 2 for 1. You get a lot of bang for your therapy buck. There is a national directory of EFT practitioners, if that sounds like it would be helpful. Let me know if you try any of this stuff. I'd be super interested to hear how it goes, or if you have other strategies that really work for you. Thanks for listening.